Welcome to the 100th edition of the Scottish Business Network podcast, the big SBN interview with myself, Ewan Dunbar, here from Dublin, and goes out to wherever you are in the world. Welcome.
Welcome to the Scottish Business Network podcast.
Welcome, Russell. Thanks for agreeing to join the inaugural SBN networking podcast. Much appreciated.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, and welcome as our new podcast host.
Thank you. And I should say, of course, I have been on to SoundCloud to check out some of the other 70. I was having a look at a few this morning. There's some great content up there.
It is, yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind, just to kick off, I'm sure most people would be aware of you and what you do and your background, but if you wouldn't mind talking us through your journey in entrepreneurship and your path that brought you to where you are today as chairperson of the Scottish Business Network.
Well, I'll try and bring out a couple of key moments. So 1964, so I was born in Scotland, in Selkirk. The family name can be traced back to the 1400s in Selkirk, so that's where all the Dalgleishes come from. I obviously spent a childhood playing rugby, not very well, and then went on to study technology at what was then Napier College. After a career in business, I worked for banks and technology companies and all those kind of people. I then started to work in turnarounds at the start of this century, and that took me into positions where I would end up running companies as well, big engineering companies, technology companies, services companies. And at that time as well, I started to spend a lot of my life in London, and I felt that it would be good to find something that brought Scots together that wasn't necessarily a rugby match or a burn supper, because my interest was business and entrepreneurship, and it was interesting to bring people together who wanted to discuss that. But there was two trigger moments. So one was 2008. So in 2008, I was selected to be a work of art for Anthony Gormley when he had the fourth plinth in Trafalgar Square. So what Anthony Gormley did. Yeah, so what Anthony Gormley did was, instead of placing a work of art on this plinth, he ran a UK competition to find individuals who wanted to give 1 hour on the plinth. So I did one of these. There was a big random draw, and I was selected. So I did a slot on this plinth, kilted at 4 a.m. one day. And what I did was it forced me to think about my Scottishness, if you like. So I stood on this plinth with cameras all rolling and everything, and I carried a flag, and I cast the flag. So the flag was a Scottish line rampant, so I was being Scottish. The casting of the flag was important because, coming from Selkirk, that's an important part of our annual common riding. So I was doing that. And all the time I was blaring out Scottish music from my past. So Deacon Blue, the Proclaimers, the Skids, people like that. And I didn't do it as a performance. I did it as an internalised work of art. So this was me. So I did all this. And it was all recorded fantastically on video. Unfortunately, I positioned myself with the back to the video. So it's an hour of my bum in a kilt. But what it did was, during that period, the sun slowly came up and dawn arrived in London. And what happened is all these vans that came past that had Scots in them who were going to early morning work would be honking their horn and saying, "Whoa, Scotland, Scotland." And it kind of struck me that this Scottishness was an important part of who I was. So I went on this journey to try to find a way that I could bring together Scotland and my business interests. Around about 2016, I met Christine Essen, who was at that point working in development for the Irish government in Dublin, but living in London. So we got together and we decided to start holding monthly events where we would invite Scottish people together to meet Scottish companies trying to enter the London market. So we would have an event every month, 50 people in the room, and we'd bring down fresh Scottish companies that were looking for connections, looking for access to market, etc. And that's kind of how we got started. And then we've just rolled it forward. And due to the global demand, we've kind of ended up with an international not-for-profit voluntary business.
Wow, fantastic stuff. Very impressive. And I love that backstory of the plinth in the middle of Trafalgar Square. Brilliant.
Yeah.
In terms of your time as CEO, I've always been keen to ask you a bit more about your career, just to take a step back. I guess what are your career highlights and your highlights as CEO of various different enterprises?
So my career has been one of a journey of luck. So I was lucky, or sort of had the idea that working in technology would be a good idea. So in 1982, I went to Napier to do a business computing course. About halfway through the first year of the 4-year degree, I found out that I'd signed up for a sandwich course. So the sandwich course involved the entire third year being in industry. And I'd never really thought about this, but this is what was going to happen. And what would happen in the third year was that all the best, highest performing students would get chosen by some great companies to go off and do 6 months or a year with them. And what happened was, as one of the underperforming students, no one wanted me. And at the last minute, Bank of Scotland came in with I think a charitable play, and they said that they would take a student to work at the Bank of Scotland in their technology department. So I was the only thing in the shop, so they got me. So I went, I spent this fantastic 48 weeks working at Bank of Scotland, learning how to be a systems analyst and a programmer and everything. So by the time I went back to college for my final year, I was kind of lined up with a job, because for the bank, this was a no-brainer to take me back, because they just spent a year training me. So that gave me an in as a technologist and as a banker. So I spent 4.5 years at the bank.
I never thought you would have been the last one to be picked out in that lineup in the playground where you get picked for a game of football. I never thought you would have been last to have been picked in terms of the business world, Russell. That's a unique insight.
Well, actually, it was a repetition of my childhood, because as the big, tall, not very fit person, I was always last to be picked for the rugby team as well. So so what happened was that I spent 4.5 years at the bank, and I was promoted very quickly, but it was because I had an unfair advantage. I spent a year there as a student, so I was promoted very quickly. And after 4.5 years, the bank sat me down and said, "Right, Russell, you're doing really well. Would you like," and remember, at this stage, technology was, I went to the bank's computer division, where I worked at Site Hill, and you had to clock in and clock out with a little bit of cardboard that punched a hole through it to say what time you arrived at work. It was that stage of computing. So so they said, do you want to specialize in computing, or do you want to specialize in banking? So I went home that night and I had a chat with my wife-to-be. And I went in the next morning and resigned, because I'd never really thought about it. But I didn't want to be a banker, and I didn't want to be a computer programmer. So I decided I would resign and do something else. So then I started on this career, so that was like an entrepreneurial move, if you like. And I went to work for Tronic, who did the credit card terminals in Dalgleish Bay. And then I got a real break. I went into a company called Kaluna Technology in Glenrothes, which was a spin-out from what had been Rodine, Scotland's highly successful disk drive company. And I spent a fantastic 4 years there, roaming the world, selling and promoting Scottish technology, primarily on the US West Coast and Japan and Korea. So that gave me a real flavour for international work. So that that was a really interesting experience. By the late 90s, I'd gone back into software again, and we launched a company called Intronet, which was the first software as a service, or what you now call cloud company, which did talent management software. So we were the first one in Europe. We ended up doing incredibly well. We rolled out our software right across companies like IBM. That was all a success. And then I went on from there to then spend the next 10 years using the skills I developed to do turnarounds. And that was really interesting because you were going into companies, it was high pressure, it was really dynamic. And then when we did the last turnaround in 2009 for a Bechtel-owned subsidiary that I went on to run, at that stage I decided I wanted to have control over my own destiny. So at that stage was when I fully committed to being the entrepreneur and then running my own future.
Fantastic stuff. And out of all of that, which is a fantastic, history of sort of experience and achievement, what are you most proud of? What are the career highlights for you, would you say?
I think that's a very difficult question for me to answer. I never really think about that. When you ask about it, what were the pivotal moments? I think a pivotal moment was joining Kelowna, this disk drive company that just floated. They were on the main exchange, and it was basically a company of engineers. Everyone was an engineer, bar me. So my job. So one of the problems when you've got an engineering company is that if a customer phones up and says, "Hello, I've got a problem," all your engineers tend to stop doing what they're doing to work on the problem because they're engineers, they're problem solvers. So my job was to act as an interface between the client and the engineers. So what would happen is I would look after all the incoming questions, inquiries, and account management. And then I would sit down with the engineering director and work out what had to be worked on. So in that first month at Kelowna, I got phone calls from NASA, from large the defense agencies from across the world. We were doing telecoms companies. We were doing all these things that I knew nothing about. Putting computer technology into low orbit spacecraft wasn't something I knew anything about, but I found out that I could act as the communication point. So the client, these technology companies, would understand that my role was to capture their requirements, and then I could go and work with the engineering department. And that was a real key moment for me, because that's when I realized I wasn't a specialist. I was what they call a generalist. I was there as the translation between people. And what I also realized at that point was that our world is very heavily based on who you know, because even knowing people within the company as, "Oh, he'll be quite good at fixing this problem," or knowing people within clients going, "Oh, I don't know you at NASA, but by the way, I know someone at the European Space Agency. Do you know Charlie?" And that kind of idea about being able to introduce and link people together. So that all happened within almost like a 6-week period for me. And the other thing that happened was that in week 3 on that job, I was sent to Comdex Fall, which was the big technology show in Las Vegas. So I was out in Silicon Valley and LA and in Las Vegas. And that gave me this incredible exposure to what was just the most incredible place in the world. Silicon Valley in the mid to the late 90s was just unbelievable as a place. New ideas were being spawned all the time. And I learned 2 things there that were really important. One was it was okay to ask for help. Because I'd been brought up in a society where your father told you to do everything yourself. Don't go asking for help, that's a weakness. So I got to understand that it was okay to ask for help and that people would respond and help. And I got this idea about community as well, that we were all trying to better the world or build these companies at the same time. And also the idea that anything is possible. That's Silicon Valley in the late 90s. You just went, of course you can go and do this. Why wouldn't you be able to? It was an amazing experience.
I'm going to try and make you blush here by saying I hold you up there, both from a personal perspective and from a business perspective, on a bit of a pedestal and someone that I'd aspire to try and emulate or be like. I love your positive attitude and your thirst to build connections and to network. But
I have to say that at 6'5", the last thing I need is to be stuck on a pedestal.
But I mean, it's the world isn't all rainbow and unicorns. I'm key to focus on that as well, that, obviously we all have our ups and downs. Tell me about the Russell Dalgleish that maybe we don't see in this day and age, that obviously you've had your fair share of challenges and adversity and difficult moments. How do you, or how have you learnt sort of self-care, self-management, self-regulation, if you like, to get through those periods of challenge or adversity, or maybe days that you just don't feel right, you just feel a bit down?
Well, I suppose I'm very fortunate. I developed probably about 25 years ago, I started working on a program which let me develop a very strong spiritual belief on the path I'm on. And it's helped me to hear this inner voice about when I'm doing the right thing. When it comes to challenges, it's really interesting because I look back to the financial crisis of 2007, 2008. So I was running a 210-person company. And by the end of that recession, we had 80 people.
Right. Now,
making that number of people redundant is just the most... It's an incredible experience to go through because of the planning, the execution, the participation. To do that when you've got people who are losing their jobs, even though they've done nothing wrong. This is, the market has changed and they've got to step down. And at the same time, you've got to keep this company motoring and doing well. And I think once I'd come through that, I kind of felt that it was, I suppose it gave me an inner strength that what I was doing was right. I remember every single one of those redundancy meetings with the individuals. I remember explaining them the situation, being quiet to listen to their feedback, and then focusing my entire commitment and my entire focus on how I could help them with what would happen next. And that was a real life-changing moment for me. And it also led me on to realizing 3 or 4 years later that I didn't want to be the person in charge of the senior person, the chief exec, the general manager. I didn't want to be that individual anymore, because people talk about the stress of being a startup or the stress of being an entrepreneur. Nothing for me was like the stress of having responsibility for the individuals who worked for that company. That was the greatest stress I ever experienced in my working life.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thanks for sharing that. I guess, knowing you the way I do, I guess you probably felt that stress more than anyone, because you wouldn't just know the name of the person, you'd probably know the name of their partner or their family members, etc. But I think that's also, that would also enable you to deliver the news in an empathetic way as well.
Yeah, I think there's something I once read that Burns had written about, who give us the gift to see ourselves as others see us. And I've worked really hard at that to try. So today I can't go into any conversation without imagining what it's like to be on the other side of the table. So even now, I'm participating in this podcast, and I'm imagining what it's like for you. So you probably want this to go smoothly, for me to answer the questions well, for me to shut up to let you say something. So as I've found that a great gift that I have, and something I've worked very hard on.
And I was going to ask you that, if there's one lesson that you wish a younger Russell Dalgleish knew, what would that be?
I read a lot about this. What would you tell your younger self? I wouldn't tell them anything, because the journey that they went on ended up here. So here is where I think I am exactly supposed to be. So I'm supposed to be 60 years old, sitting here doing what I'm doing. That's what I'm supposed to do. And I think in life, if you can find out what you're actually here on this planet for, and you can do that, it can only lead to you doing it well and you to experiencing joy. I did a piece about this recently, and I and you are incredibly lucky. There are 8 billion people in the world, and we could just have been born anywhere in the world. We could have been one of those people. So when you've got half the world's population living on less than $5 a day, the chance of you and I being successful was pretty high. We were born in this country with free health service, free education, high standard of living. We were in a pretty gifted position to be successful. So I think it all comes down to luck. I think that. But I think that finding your niche, being really rigorously honest about who you are and what you enjoy doing and what you're good at. Not what you want to be good at. I don't want to be promoted. I want to be doing this thing I'm doing. And then to focus all of your attention on it is just a chance to be as successful as you can be.
I love that appreciation of just how privileged we are in this world. And, with that in mind, what's your philosophy in terms of the best way to give back and support others? Reach back and try and support others coming in the path behind us.
So I have a philosophy of helping. So my job's really easy. I wait and someone says, "Can you help us do this?" So we're doing it for the GovTech cluster at the moment. So we're going out to California at the end of this month. So that's the plan. And then it's just my job is just to facilitate that and make it happen. So invite the people, find the location, plan the event, get the speakers. I can do all that, but it's triggered by someone else having to ask. So that's a really good place to be in for me. It works for me. So it leads to periods where you might be doing 8 different projects simultaneously, but I've discovered I'm good at that. And I don't get stressed about it. I enjoy operating in that way. So that's what I do. I wait to get called. So you called me, you dropped me a note yesterday or something and said, would I do this podcast today? So that's easy. I can say yes.
I should say we did discuss it a good few weeks ago as well. So I don't come across as too disorganised, but yeah, thanks indeed for accommodating it fairly last minute. And so tell me, Russell, about the Scottish Business Network. What's the vision for that? What's the purpose?
Yeah, great question. So I ask myself this question all the time. So Scottish Business Network is a brand or a standard which people can rally around. The rallying cry is to bring together people. So bring together people who are interested in Scotland, are interested in business. So, and that it's really as simple as that. It just provides a platform to get us all together. So last week we had you over in Scotland from Dublin, we had Miguel over from Lisbon, we had Bruce over from New York, and it was just amazing seeing everyone together. And what we did when we were together is we discussed how we could do more to help. How could we raise more ambition for what we're trying to do? How could we connect in more people? We're driven as an organisation by asks. So if you were to say, Russell, I'm going out to New Orleans next week. I'd like to try and meet people at the Port of New Orleans. That's what we try to facilitate. So we have this enormous database of all the Scottish people we know around the world, and we would just go to the ones in New Orleans and say, Ewan's coming over. Would you have 5 minutes to have a chat with them on the phone beforehand? Because what we've discovered is that 5-minute call gives people the chance to start building trust. And that way, they'll meet you when you're out there, and they'll also have an idea what you're trying to achieve, so they in turn will invite someone else to the meeting. And that's the way it grows. We've discovered that we're best when it's reaching out from Scotland, and to a lesser extent, people coming into Scotland. So it's not so much as doing things in Scotland, because there's a myriad of organisations that do that. We're providing this connectivity to the world.
You mentioned, you referred previously to the ask, and I know it's something that you focus in on, particularly, for Scots who maybe aren't we're maybe a bit more backwards about coming forwards in terms of the ask. I guess what is the ask? And then the second part of that question is, what is your ask?
So the ask is a very specific question, whereby if you receive an answer to that question, it will help you move forward, help you move your business forward, your career forward, whatever it is. So the best, and the ask has to be as specific as possible. So the best ask we ever had was, we were at an event in London, and the gentleman who was speaking said he was trying to get in to meet the head of data at the British Museum, right? So we're like 50 Scots in a room. So there's not a high chance we're going to know that person. Typically, we're not technologists. But what happened with that ask is someone put their hand up and said, oh, my cousin is on the board of the British Museum. I'll ask him. And that's how it works, because it's not the obvious connection. It's the implied connection from people who want to help you. So that then led to a meeting. And it's just, so it's having a very specific ask as to how do you think we can help?
In reality, the chances are, to your point, you are only one, maybe two max degrees of separation removed from the people you need to speak to. In this day and age, I guess, with the amount of connections that we have and the LinkedIn's, and there is a quite an easy road to getting to speak to the right people if we search hard enough, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, theoretically, but it's actually quite hard. So there's we're doing a campaign at the moment for net zero. So a Scottish business network, we've actually created a couple of other companies. So one of those companies is Net Zero Nation, which helps SMEs reduce their carbon footprint. So we've built that company up following COP26 taking place in Glasgow. And the other one is the GovTech cluster, which is where we build on the likes of CivTech in Scotland to help companies that are developing citizen-focused technology into new markets around the world. So we have these other things that we've developed. So we're doing a project at the moment with Net Zero Nation, and they're looking to meet with senior execs at big companies who might be able to use their services. So yes, it is possible to use LinkedIn to say, well, it's that person, but there's the getting that person's attention and structuring a message in such a way that the person will want to speak to them. And that's the thing that we do astonishingly well. So opening that door in a way that will structure a meeting so that it will help you, we've seen huge success at that. And it's really weird because we live in a world where everyone's running an accelerator and the ways to do business. An awful lot of business happens because two people met. You had a chat with someone on an aeroplane, or you bumped into someone at a bar, or you were doing a pitch and someone said, oh, could you do this other thing? It can be described as chance or something. But what we do is we just reduce that as chance and make it slightly more focused. And I know for myself, I've met certain individuals who have transformed my life. And you know what? I can't even remember how I met them. But there was a chance meeting, and then off we went to do something. So that's what we tried. So we call these collisions. We try to create these collisions.
It's creating that serendipity effect almost.
Yes.
Was it Gary Player, Arnold Palmer? The more I practice, the luckier I get type thing. The more I put myself out there, the more connections and the more likely I am to get that serendipity effect.
Now here's the bit where I'm lucky. So I come from a nation of people who don't want to put themselves out there. So just as I mentioned before about the fact that I was brought up by a father who would have said, do everything yourself, don't ever, ever ask for help. I was also brought up in an education system where I was encouraged never to take a risk. So if you imagine it, I'm at school, maybe late primary school, early secondary school, and the teacher asks a question. And I go, me, I know the answer. And the teacher goes, yes, Russell. And I give her the answer and she goes, no, that's wrong. So what happens at no, that's wrong is the entire class laughs at me. Every single one of them.
Social pain.
Yeah, and you're ridiculed for the next 4 years at school about wrong, right? So I was brought up in that society where I was encouraged not to take risks and to sort of almost be invisible. So because of my experience in California and a little bit in Japan as well, I discovered that you have to be visible. You have to tell people what you do. You have to do it with passion and you have to do it with belief. So I've sort of, to a certain extent, I'm doing this for Scotland. Right, so that's my commitment or my give back, if you like. And then I meet these other people that do it as well, and we become Scottish Business Network. We become the ambassadors who do this.
And I'm not sure you fully answered this, but what is your ask?
So I don't have an ask, except for, can you please answer the question, how can I help you? So we're driven by people asking questions, because I can't reach out to all these Scottish people around the world for no reason, but I can reach out to them to help you. So what I need more people coming to me saying, hey, can you help us with this project? And we've got lots of people who want to help. And we're also, like, we're a not-for-profit. Everyone's doing this as volunteers. And the one thing I say about business is, if I introduce someone to you, Ewan, and you help them and it's going well and they want to take more of your time, then you and they would form a commercial relationship, because that's the way business works, and it would blossom from there. So we kick off an awful lot of those as well.
Fantastic stuff. Okay, I'm conscious of your time. You've been very, very generous. Many thanks. Just to finish up, a few quick-fire questions. What's Russell Dalgleish's favourite book or podcast?
My favourite book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's I read it to this day. It's transformational.
I probably should have guessed that one. Any favourite quotes?
No. Well, I suppose the Burns one. I've used that quite a lot. The gift to give us to see ourselves as others see us. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that. And what's the best advice you ever received?
I think it's ask for help. I cannot explain to people who are not Scottish how difficult it is to ask for help. It's just, if you imagine, I don't know what your upbringing was like, Ewan, but the whole idea of the fact that you wouldn't fix the tyre yourself would just be like, you're a man, Russell, fix the tyre. What do you mean you're going to phone the AA? No, it's that kind of upbringing. It's so, and even to this day, there's moments where I go, oh no, I can't ask for help. This is so embarrassing. But you do it, and that makes it easier. So asking for help.
I think just on that point, I love it. It's that self-awareness of your upbringing and your evolutionary echoes from your upbringing, how it impacts on you. Certainly a Scottish coaching client who operates down in London once said to me, Ewan, I don't understand why everyone's so needy. All my staff are really needy. They keep coming to me looking for help. And I was saying, well, I nearly said his name, but I said, that's not on them, that's on you, because I know based on your upbringing, you're trained that asking for help is a negative. Whereas, obviously, to your point, asking for help is a positive, or can be a positive if conveyed in the right ways. So I'll give you
the best example was there's a venture capitalist in San Jose called Eric McAfee. I think his family's 4th or 5th generation Scottish. And I was on the phone. I put a post out and said, no, does anyone want to come to Scotland and do some talks? And he responded within an hour and said, I'll come. And we had him here for 3 days. And he gave the most astonishing advice to the entrepreneurs here about raising capital, about building businesses. And what he said was that sometimes in Scotland, you just have to park your Scottishness for a few hours and just be a blitzing American and just go out there and do it. So I've always remembered that advice. So asking for help.
That's a great note to finish on. Thank you, Russell. If anyone wants to reach out and contact you, how are they best doing it? Is it LinkedIn or?
Yeah, LinkedIn, or my email is russell@sbn.scot.
Great, thank you. Well, thanks again for your time. Thanks again for your wisdom, and thanks again for your friendship. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Ewan. Great to see you.